Welcome to New Breakpoint, Microsoft's digital event series designed for developers by developers. I'm your host, Michelle Sanford, the Developer Engagement Lead for Australia, New Zealand and Asia. We broadcast on the second Thursday of every month, and if you join us on the day, my guests and I will answer your questions live in chat. As you might know, New Breakpoint has expanded to encompass Asia Pacific, meaning we now bring interviews with developer experts from all over Asia. Today, I am speaking with my friend Aaron Powell, who lives over in Sydney. Aaron is a principal cloud advocate for Microsoft. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you demonstrate how to add agents to anything with Copilot SDK. But first, for those who haven't met you yet, perhaps you could tell us a bit about yourself and what you do as a principal cloud advocate.
Sure. So thanks for having me on, Michelle. It's lovely to finally be part of the New Breakpoint family. I've been a fan for years, so I finally getting to join you on camera is a nice change from just watching everyone else share their amazing stuff with you and your audience. But yes, for those that haven't had the pleasure of meeting me, yes, my name is Aaron. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I'm part of the .NET Developer Relations team at Microsoft. But I've actually been spending more and more of my time with GitHub Copilot, which is kind of interesting because I've been doing web development for the better part of the last 20 years. So this AI stuff is only really kind of new to me, like it is, I guess, to most of us out there. So yeah, and recently we started playing with Copilot SDK, which is another, I guess, tool in our toolbox. And I wanted to kind of share a bit about what that is, what we can do with it. And I'm going to do this in .NET because I feel like there's not enough .NET appears on New Breakpoint and just kind of in general. I'm a .NET developer at heart, as evident by being in the .NET DevRel team.
It's definitely true that I have some bias towards Python and JavaScript, but Stacey was on and she did C# and .NET, and I think Rakesh also did his demos in .NET, and Daniel might have done them in both. So I do try to make sure there is something for all our enterprise developers who I know love the .NET environment, love Aspire. We had Scott Hunter on the show talking entirely about Aspire, which was really cool. Anyway, you are out there, you're working with developers all the time, you see what's happening and what people are excited about. What trends are you seeing that made Copilot SDK necessary?
Well, it's something that, as we've seen people building out more and more like AI-enabled applications and going down the path of building like agentic workflows and things like that, there's one thing that a lot of people struggle with in the transition from like proof of concept to production, and that is like actually making a production ready agent. Like that's hard work, because while the code might be relatively trivial to talk to an MCP server or to have some custom instructions baked into it to give your persona to your agent, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of forget that goes around that. Things like your responsible AI practices. How do you do resilience in it? Avoid someone that's trying to come in and do something nefarious like prompt injection or anything to that regards. So like these sorts of things you really want to make sure you're doing in a production ready agentic workflow is, well, you don't want to end up in tech media because someone has figured out how to jailbreak your AI system, and the AI is telling it that you could totally buy that product for like pennies in the dollar and things like that. And that's part of what I see the value that Copilot SDK brings, and one of the trends that is really like geared towards that is that, well, we know GitHub Copilot is a production-ready agent. We use it in whether it's VS Code, Visual Studio, in IntelliJ, or at the command line. Why can't we leverage that power that we've built into it and all the work that's gone into making that production-ready for our own applications as well?
Maybe we should take a step back, because I know that a lot of people out there are super overwhelmed by how all these features and tools and everything else is being thrown at them. You mentioned MCP. we've had agent framework, we've had all sorts of things. Could you like just break it down and say what exactly is the GitHub Copilot SDK and what kind of experiences is it trying to enable beyond the normal editor?
Yeah, actually, why don't I bring up the repo? Because I think that'll help contextualize things a little bit as we dive around. So let me just start a screen share, and if I can find the right thing to share. That one. So I have 3 monitors, which means that I have lots of screens that need to be managed and find and all that sort of stuff. But here we go. So this is the repo. You'll find it. It's an open source project. It's at github.com/github/copilot-SDK, and the SDK. Well, we've got 4 flavors of it. We've got it for JavaScript and TypeScript, or I guess Node.js is your runtime, Python is a runtime, Golang, and my favorite, .NET. So we can build applications there. And let me just actually come down a little bit. And we have a very basic architecture diagram here to kind of explain what it is. So you have your application written in kind of whichever language you do choose. And then you want to talk to Copilot as an agentic tool. Well, Copilot CLI is that tool that you talk to, but it kind of be like, how do we manage that communication back forward? Like, how do we integrate a CLI application into like a web application or a desktop application you might be building? Well, that's where Copilot SDK sits. It sits in between your application and Copilot CLI, and it allows you to, well, essentially create a connection to it, manage send prompts across to Copilot CLI. Then Copilot CLI, being that production-ready agentic workflow, goes and knows how to use tools, use MCP servers, talk to the different models that you've configured the application to use, and then it will come back with a response that you can then present to your users. So that's kind of where it sits in this overall piece of the puzzle.
I'm just trying to picture it in my mind. So why would the product teams or developers consider bringing Copilot-powered agents into their own apps or workflows rather than just relying on the GitHub Copilot on its own? Because it seems to me like it does all its stuff. Well,
let's imagine that you have a kind of a specific sort of agentic workflow that you want to target. Something that actually I'm gonna give a sneak peek of for the audience. Stick around to the end because we're going to build something with Copilot SDK. And let's say that I am wanting to ensure that I'm building web applications that are accessible. Well, we've got Playwright. It's another tool from Microsoft that has like an MCP server available to it, and it is a browser automation tool, which means that it can do things like generate out accessibility reports, and it can even generate tests. Well, that's great. I can use Copilot CLI. I can integrate it with the MCP server. Maybe then I'm going to go find a custom agent that I can start with, but I have to kind of bring a bunch of this stuff together. But imagine if I could just have a tool that was an accessibility agent. That's literally the only thing that tool is going to be doing. So it's just like, it's a binary that I download onto my machine. I run it with a URL, and then it's going to produce me an accessibility report and then give me the option to generate some tests. I haven't had to do all that other configuration for me. Someone has done that by building that into our application. So yes, you're not wrong that you can do all this stuff because it is just orchestrating Copilot CLI under the hood, but it allows you to build your own application on top of that and constrain it into the box that you need for that particular little bit of a workflow.
So it's making it a lot more cost effective and a lot more energy efficient and all of that as well?
Yeah, exactly. Because instead of having to learn a new framework, so like learn agent framework or semantic kernel or LangChain or something like that, and then okay, which models do I need to use? Then I need to set up Azure AI Foundry, and then I'm going to deploy models to there, and then I need to work out how do I define my agents inside of this library that I'm using. How do I then put responsible AI patterning over the top of them, and so on and so forth. You're essentially just turning this into a commodity that you can consume within your application with only a handful of lines of code. And I said we'll jump into the code. We'll actually build something a little bit later on, and hopefully you as the audience watching on at home are going to be like, wow, that's actually very few lines of code that's needed to build out something on top of like build an agent, like build a custom application that has an agent in it.
I think I'm getting it. And definitely, I can't wait for the demos. Maybe you could start by walking us through some of the core building blocks of the SDK and what does the basic Copilot enabled workflow look like?
Yep. Well, actually, one thing I should also call out is that so while the Copilot SDK officially supports those 4 languages of TypeScript, Python, Go, and .NET, runtimes. TypeScript's the language, not a runtime. We do actually have it. There's a community project that's run by one of my colleagues in the DevRel team called the Copilot Community SDKs, and there's a Java and a Rust version in there if those are ones that you're interested in. And we've also had other people in the community have already built out things like there's a C++ one if you're building an application that's using C++ or Clojure. So there are some other open source third-party implementations of the SDK. But let's actually have a look at some code. And knowing that you're more of like a JavaScript and a Python person, I'll use Node.js as the example here. I'm not enough of a Python expert to not make a fool of myself on camera talking about this, but I know well enough through JavaScript. So anyway,
I think you did a fair few years of JavaScript.
I definitely did. But anyway, so we pull in our SDK. So we need to get Copilot SDK from npm in this case, or pip or NuGet or as a Go mod in that regards. And then we're going to. You're also going to need to have the Copilot CLI installed on the machine, or it does support bring your own keys (BYOK), so you can connect to a remote Copilot CLI instance or like a remote Copilot compatible API. Just like in VS Code, you can use bring your own keys, so you can connect to like an Olama server if you preferred. So you can do that with the SDK. I personally haven't tried that, but I have seen demos of some stuff that people have done with that. But anyway, let's just go with, we're going to go with a simple workflow of we've got Copilot SDK, we're going to use that, and we've got Copilot CLI on our machines. So we're going to start by creating a Copilot client. So this is the thing that's going to manage the interactions with the Copilot CLI, and then we're going to start that client. So this kind of code that we're looking at here is very similar depending on which language you're working with. There's obviously going to be some slight language nuances, but hopefully people can look at this and understand that when they convert it to the Python version or the .NET version or whatever the case may be. So we start this. So that's essentially starting the CLI in the background. So you don't see this. It's done using RCP. So it's just going to sit there in the background running, waiting for you to then create a session. So we create a new session. So this is going to be the user interaction that's going to happen. We can provide it with a bunch of options, such as like the model that we want to use. We can provide it with any MCP servers that we might want, custom tools, that sort of thing. And then we are then just going to listen to the stream of, I was going to say the stream of consciousness, but it's not AGI. It's not actually the stream of messages that come back from the CLI. So here we've just got a promise callback in JavaScript that's going to be listening to that session. And then when we receive particular types of events, so like a system message, so this is the message that's come back from Copilot. We're going to do something with this. In this case, it's just console.log. And then that's just going to sit there, and that's just a thing that's running on the event loop in JavaScript. And then lastly, we are going to send a prompt across to that session. So we're going to, what's 2 plus 2? And then we're going to wait for that promise to be completed. So we're going to wait for that session to essentially come through to run through to completion. You could run this obviously inside of a loop, like if you wanted to create your own command line tool, or it was your own web interface or like a desktop application. You could have that inside of like a loop that where instead of just waiting for one message to complete your exiting, you're waiting for continual messages and constantly re-prompting the user for continuations. But yeah, and then lastly, we do a bit of cleanup, like destroy that session and then stop the client so it terminates that background process that might have been running. So that's kind of like I said, it's not many lines of code. Like I'm running at like 125% zoom, 150% zoom, and we can fit that entire chunk of code, including code comments on the screen for a basic interaction with the CLI.
That's very cool. But I only really understand things when you show me pictures. Is there any like recommended architecture that they have?
Not yet. So this is obviously a very new thing where we released it only at the end of January. So we're like, this is being iterated on super fast. I also will point out, at least at the time of recording, this is in technical preview. So we're looking for feedback, exactly the kind of thing that you're asking about there. What is the right architecture do you think that's going to happen for working with this? How do you handle things like session persistence? So if you did have something where you wanted the user to be able to exit your application, come back later and pick it up, what's that look like? I definitely don't have the answers to that. I don't think the team necessarily has the answers to that because we're still ultimately trying to figure this out.
Well, I will look forward to the pictures, but I do think that there's been quite a few really good blogs that people have written, and we will add all of the resources into our GitHub log for this episode so people can read up more and learn more about it as we go. I think, compared to where we were a few years ago when stuff would come out but the documentation wasn't yet ready, this is a different world now. Documentation is there, blogs are there, so even though I don't have a beautiful architectural picture to follow exactly, there are definitely step-by-steps to help take me through it, and you're gonna teach us stuff today. So is there any, before we go into that, just, and I know it's very early days, but have you seen any or heard of any like real world gotchas that people should be aware of when they're building or when they're thinking of building?
I mean, probably the number one thing with this is that like we've got to remember that it is still a technical preview. So there's the potential that things are going to change in the way that it's designed, the way that it works. It is so obviously buyer beware, I guess would be the right way to describe that. The other thing that I would say is that this is more designed around something that's running on a particular machine, like because it is orchestrating Copilot CLI. I would probably not be deploying this into a web application just yet without working out some way to, I guess, centrally host Copilot as a as like a service, which is not, it's not ideal. You've got things like authentication, like if it's an external, like if you're trying to do a multi-tenant application, like a web application, it's all going to go through one GitHub Copilot account, and well, you'll very quickly blow out your daily, or your monthly token allowances and agent call allowances and stuff like that because it's through a funnel. There is work being done to make like a better authentication experience, but we'll get there. It's still early days.
Yeah, so I think we do like to stress that whenever anything is in preview and not yet GA, people shouldn't be thinking about putting this in prod yet, but they should absolutely be playing with it. They should be doing some little MVPs. They should be trying to like firm up their ideas for what they could do with it as when they move it into production. But yes, don't move it yet. And I was just looking at the SDK repo on GitHub, and yeah, there is like a really nice step-by-step that we could follow through. So yeah, there's plenty to do and plenty to learn before we get to GA.
Exactly.
Cool. So you've promised some practical examples today. Do you want to show us something?
Yep. Let's jump over, and like all good demos, it's going to start from a terminal. Mostly because let's build out a command line application, and we'll come into the terminal. We're going to build out here, but for this, actually, do we want to go Copilot CLI? No, maybe we'll go with VS Code, just because that will make it a little bit. Give us some flexibility. So let me bring my VS Code instance onto screen. There we go. I'm going to trust the authors of that folder because I'm the author of the folder. And like I said, I'm going to create this as a .NET application. We're going to do some artisanal coding, as I like to call it, whereas I'm not going to rely on Copilot to write the whole thing.
Goodness.
I know. This is going to be we're going to run this a little bit scarily. All right, so let me just create. I'm just going to create a new file, and this will be let's go Copilot SDK. All right, so we'll call it Copilot SDK. There we go. Instead, we're going to write this in .NET. I'm using file-based apps. If you haven't seen them with .NET, it just means that I don't have to build a bunch of other things that you would often have with .NET applications, like project files and solutions and things like that you might need in Visual Studio. This is just going to be a single file that I can either, because I'm on Linux, I can chmod it, and I can just like run it from the command line because it's got a shebang at the top.
Cool.
Anyway, I digress. So I'm not here to pitch .NET to anyone too much.
You absolutely can, because everyone knows that I love Python, and so you should bring the balance to this show. Yep.
Okay. So as I said, we're gonna use the .NET one, and actually let's start with the quick start from here. Rather than just watching me type everything out constantly, we'll just grab all this quick start code and paste that into here. And okay. Through the magic of editing, I found what I had wrong, and it turns out that I've actually broken my .NET install on WSL, so that's going to be a fun one that I'll have to fix after this. So I actually jumped over to Windows, and we're going to run it off Windows. It's fine. We can carry on. As we can see, I've got rid of all my red squigglies. It just means I can't use the shebang, and like I can't chmod because that doesn't work on Windows. That's fine. We can run this file anyway. So let's walk through what we've got here from a code perspective. So I brought in the package. So I brought in the package from NuGet, like we would do from pip or npm, and so on and so forth. And you can see it's fairly similar, like analogous code to what we saw with TypeScript. We're creating our Copilot client, we're starting it, we're creating a session. In this case, I'm giving it a model. And in this case, rather than a promise, we use a task completion source. I'm going to listen to events on that session, and then we're going to wait for that task to be completed. So let's pop up our terminal here, and if we do .NET run, and we'll do Copilot. So this is behind the scenes going to run Copilot CLI. Like I haven't actually, I've got it obviously installed on my machine. We're not going to see that happen. We're not going to see like a new terminal window pop up or anything like that, but we're going to send that prompt across. In this case, the prompt was the very exciting, what is 2 + 2? And we'll see how good GPT-5 is at completing maths. Now, this will obviously take time depending on the level of complexity you've got in the prompt that you've given it, how many MCP servers, the model you're working with, kind of all the sorts of things you would deal with when you're building out like any kind of agentic workflow, things you have to consider. In the time that I was talking, we'll see that we've got back a response with 4. And it looks like GPT-5 is pretty good at very basic arithmetic. But
you're laughing, but a couple of years ago that was not the case. Everything struggled with very basic arithmetic.
Exactly, like it used to be like, wow, it's been able to add 2 numbers together. That's exciting. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the other things we might be able to do with this, though, because that's fine. Like it's a reasonably straightforward bit of an example, and you could see how you could use this as, like, instead of having a hard-coded prompt, I could be doing, in this case, console.readline and get a input from the user and then pipe that across, or like some other way that we pass in that prompt. But I talked about the reason that you might want to be looking at Copilot SDK is that it allows you to kind of craft your own agent application. And so to do that, we want to start modifying the way that we're creating our connection to Copilot and the session that we're starting up. So when we create our Copilot client, we've got a bunch of things that we can provide to it as options that we can modify the way that it works. So if we go new Copilot options. So again, this is going to be slightly different depending on the language you work with. This is just the semantics of it, because it's going to be language. Oops, I didn't mean to. I went to control space. So things like auto restart. So like if the the Copilot CLI instance behind the scenes crashes. If you want to modify the way Copilot CLI is launched, so by default it won't be launched with like tools enabled, or it won't run like YOLO mode, or and like if you wanted to restrict the tools it has access to, stuff like that. We can modify where it thinks it's running. So if you want to have contextual information based off of a file system, maybe you're going to pass in the current working directory of where you are, or you want users to be able to pass in a working directory that your application is going to run against. Modifications around like environment, stuff like that. Even a custom path to where the CLI exists. So like if you were shipping this as an application, you could bundle in the CLI as an example, and pass that in there. So those are some options you've got around the way that the client will be talking to the CLI. It's also if you're using the HTTP endpoint of the CLI, like BYOK and stuff like that. I'm not going to pass in any different options from a client because I find the standard client kind of works well enough for me, but it's the session. The session is where we might want to craft something a bit more, I guess, finesse to the agent that we're trying to build. So obviously I've got my model here of GPT-5. Like I could change this to like, if we wanted to say Claude Opus 4.5, so like I could do that if I wanted like that kind of a model as well. Like if I wanted something slightly more advanced, or arguably more advanced. Let's not start like arguments in the comment section on what is the better model to go with. But then other things that we could have is like available tools. By default, like it has access to some of the standard tools that Copilot CLI ships with. So like fetching a web URL, reading files off disk. So you don't have to write like, this is how you read a file on disk if you find that file on disk, or here's how you do like a HTTP request and pull that down. But maybe you've got a particular bit of logic that you want to process from a response that comes back, so you can put that in there, and there's a tool that Copilot is then capable of calling. We can provide it with custom agents. So if I had an agent definition that I wanted to Copilot's trying to be helpful here and give me completions around. It's like, I don't want completions at the moment. I'm trying to explain things. But like, so I can provide it with a custom agent. So like a definition of an agent. So that persona that we want that agent to have. If I want to disable some of the built-in tools, like I don't want it to be capable of executing a shell command, I can disable that here, kind of put some security sandboxes around it. If I want to use hooks, MCP servers, so on and so forth, that's where I can configure a whole bunch of this stuff in here. If I wanted to, every time you start a session, it's going to generate a new ID, but maybe I want to have a bit more of a well-known ID so that someone could come back and resume that session. Well, I could generate a new GUID, write that GUID out to them at the end of the session so that they could then do a resume on it. Or I could write that to a database and attach it to them so that they could come to the application and pick a past run session so that they can go back and find that.
There's like really a lot of choices in there, and maybe people don't know what all of those are, but I mean, that's another advantage of having GitHub Copilot right here in your code window, because you could just ask it, right? You can just say, explain to me what some of these things are for. What does this do? What does this mean? Where might I use it? And so while you are learning to build with GitHub Copilot SDK, you're also learning more about the whole thing yourself, and you can ask it those million questions. You don't have to switch out of your context window, and you don't have to go and ask someone else about it. So it's a good way to go in depth, learning all you need to learn right now while it's in preview, and no need to wait for that part, right? The learning part.
Precisely, yeah. So it does give you that ability to do some customizations and do like, I wouldn't say on the job learning, because we're always on the job learning as engineers, but to help you enhance while you're just like exploring a new API.
Yeah.
So let's play with an MCP server. So here's how I would define an MCP server to be able to be used in this session in my custom Copilot agent. So again, obviously it's going to vary depending on the language, how you structure that, but I'm going to make Playwright available as an MCP server. And then this is going to use the Playwright MCP server, which happens to actually be an NPM, like a node tool. So we're going to be using NPX. If you want to say connect to a hosted MCP server, say one that's provided by like Microsoft Learn, we could connect to that as like a HTTP endpoint and so on and so forth. So like however you want to consume an MCP server, it just knows how to talk MCP server. So we just give it this config here of the MCP server that I want to work with. And then I could, if I wanted to create a custom agent, I could do all that kind of stuff, but we're going to let's just tackle some of this through prompt engineering. All right. But I also want to kind of run this maybe as a bit of an event loop. So I am going to just, again, bring in some more code. Also, I'm going to run this as a streaming response. So rather than waiting for the entire response back from Copilot, we're going to kind of wait for it to, it's going to give us kind of tokens at a time. That response that you kind of see in the output of Copilot, whether it's in your editor or CLI or wherever the case may be, where you get it's answering you progressively rather than just like blah at the end. So I'm just going to copy in some code rather than type it all out again. So I'm just going to update how we're handling those events. So I'm looking for a message delta event. So this is a small piece of the message that has come along. So small event, small event, small event. So we're going to keep outputting those to our console. When we find out the session has gone idle, so essentially we're no longer sending it new prompts, Copilot itself has finished doing work on our behalf, we're going to set the result and kind of initiate a termination process here. And then I've just got some very simple error handling there. Now, we'll leave this little bit of code at the bottom here, but because I want to really constrain how this application works, like this is going to be an application for working with Playwright as MCP server to perform accessibility tests. I'm going to give it a very tightly constrained prompt. And again, copy and paste that in because it's a large amount of information here. So we're going to tell it that we want to use the Playwright MCP server, and we're actually going to be capturing a URL. Sorry, I'm going to throw some stuff up at the top of this file so that we actually have that URL there. So we're just going to be prompting the user to enter a URL, and hopefully they've entered that correctly. Otherwise, we're going to kick them out of the application. Okay, so given the URL that the user has entered, I want you to go to it and we're giving it some instructions here. So I want to use the Playwright Browser Navigate tool. So this is something that the MCP server is going to provide to us. I want to do some accessibility testing on it, and then I want it to generate me a report. So here is how I want that report structured. So in this case, I'm just outputting it as what would be Markdown that I could, maybe it can write to a file that we would then have as part of, say, like the response from a CI job. Like here's an accessibility report on that change that you've done. Here's some issues that it might have found, some statistics and stuff like that. And then it's going to go ahead and we're going to execute that prompt. So let's copy this up again. Whoops. Paste. So here we go. Now I'm just going to give it that prompt. Easy enough. And we're going to wait for it to be completed. Let's give this a run and we'll see what happens this time. So we'll run that same Copilot SDK file. Hopefully it's going to prompt me for a URL of a website, and I'm just going to use my website. Okay, so this is where you to a degree you've got human in the loop here. So like I'm having some back and forth interactions with it, but I'm having a very constrained interaction. As you can see, like it's asked me for a URL, and then it's going to go ahead and do stuff. And fingers crossed, I have got all my code correct and that my previous run of the demo is still valid because I did test this before. Okay, we can see here. Okay, so this is actually a window that's been launched by the Playwright MCP server. So this is my website. It's launched that browser. Playwright behind the scenes is doing some automation against that browser. So it's inspecting the DOM, it's having a look for accessibility information, doing the stuff that it would need to perform its role of generating an accessibility report. If we come back to VS Code, we'll see that it's starting to give us some information. So it's doing some examination. So it's looking at the page source and so on and so forth. So this is going to take a minute or two to complete because, well, it's got to download all of that and then perform the process. Oh, there we go. Speak of the response. There we go. We can see that it's given us with that structure that we said. So we see here's our accessibility report. It's telling me some useful things about, like, I've got a lang on the HTML lang attribute. We've got a title, heading hierarchy, but then I've got some issues that I might want to fix. So there's, say, a high severity because I don't have some proper landmarking in it. I don't have some good navigation, stuff like that. So here are some recommendations that Copilot has had based on it. So now, like, I could bundle this up as an application that we have as part of our CI job. It could be something that we share around within our team. It could be a bit of code that's inside of a repo that we just run like on our machine. Like, it just becomes part of our workflow. I don't have to type out a prompt. I don't have to do anything specific to Copilot. I just kind of let Copilot, I let my custom application sort of take care of that for me.
That's very cool. I was a little bit distracted there from when you pasted all that stuff in, and I just thought, actually, maybe that's also a good time for you to mention the awesome Copilot repo.
Yeah. So obviously trying to write all of this stuff can be tricky, particularly the Copilot SDK, for example, is brand new. It's only been out for a couple of weeks, depending on when you're watching this. So to kind of help with that, we've got the documentation in the GitHub repo here, but we've also, as part of this, we've created some custom instructions that you can include inside of your repository. So if you read we have an FAQ section on the README here, and we come down and we'll see that we have some custom instructions over at Awesome Copilot. So Awesome Copilot is a companion repo for working with GitHub Copilot. Inside of here, we have custom agents, custom instructions, custom prompts, and skills. These are all things that the community have written for us and contributed back just to make it easier for you to get up and running with. And I could say install these instructions into VS Code for working with the Copilot SDK CLI, C# version. There's Go, there's the Node.js, there's Python. And this is something that we can add to our repo that is then aware of how to work with Copilot SDK. But also there's, I think we're coming close to 500 different items inside of this repo. So there's going to be an agent or an instructions or prompts that will help you out no matter kind of what you're working with. You should be able to find it inside of Awesome Copilot.
That's very useful, because I do think it's really important that people don't try and reinvent the wheel. I think there's too much coming at people too fast these days, and so if they can already get some best practices that someone else has already tested and tried and just put those in, it's not to say you can't build on that afterwards yourself and make more customizations, but it's great to have a place to start that comes with some expertise in it.
Yep, for sure. And yeah, this is a great way to kind of bootstrap your own knowledge. Prompt engineering is still a relatively new term. So how do I write a good prompt? How do I write a good agent or skill or whatever the case may be? Well, you can use Awesome Copilot as another resource to help you do that. What I've kind of toyed around with is the idea of using the Copilot SDK to build a little application to help you learn by using the information in the Awesome Copilot repo. So it becomes very meta at that point, I think.
Yeah, my my brain switched off as you said that. It's just like, what? This is marvelous. Okay, good. Is that everything that you were going to show me?
I want to just extend this application. Because I want to show you that, like, how you can use this as like a building block in what you might be doing. So, like, right now we'll generate out our accessibility report. But what if we wanted to kind of have a bit more of like a back and forth interaction, so that it is like, if you think about how you use like Copilot, you ask it a question, it gives you a response, and you ask it another question, and it builds on top of that context. Well, we're running here in a like continual session. So with that, we could then get it to continue on in that session and do some additional information, do some additional stuff. So I'm going to drop in a large chunk of additional code, but let's go back and have a look at look at this code and kind of explain what's going on here. And I realized that I have miscopied something. Yep, I missed a closing squiggly bracket. Okay, so this new code that I've dropped in is that once it's finished generating the report, maybe I want it to generate some tests from that accessibility report that I could then have it contribute to my repository. Now, because this is contextually aware of what's happening in our application, we should be able to get it to keep using that same session. Like I want to continue with that session. So here we go. We're going to prompt, like, do you want to write some accessibility tests? So we're going to wait for the user to, and if the user says yes, we're going to give it a prompt. In this case, I want Copilot to do a bit of work on my behalf. So I wanted to try and figure out what is the right programming language to use to generate these tests. So it's going to look into the files that are in this current repo and try and figure out what is the most likely one that we're going to write with, want to write these tests in. Otherwise, it'll suggest TypeScript as the default. It's then going to come back and prompt me and go, hey, do you want to write the tests in language detected or something else? So again, like, we're setting Copilot off to do a job for us. It's then going to try and figure out what that could be, give us an answer that we can then action against, give it some additional direction if we need. And again, we're then going to tell it, well, I want you to generate some tests for that URL using the context that you've got of this session that's in play. Again, this is a prompt that we're giving it. This prompt would be hard-coded into our application. It's embedded in there because the application is designed to be used for a single set of, like, a single job. It's not meant to be a general purpose AI assistant. It's a specific job AI assistant. So then it's going to go ahead and generate some tests and so on and so forth. So let's kick this off again. And we'll get it to run, and we're going to get it to run against my website again. So again, Playwright is going to launch the browser, perform an accessibility report. It's then going to come back with that. It's then going to ask me if I want to continue any kind of interaction. So let's give it a moment while Copilot will, while Copilot instructs Playwright to run a browser through pure automation. Like you said that your mind was kind of getting like blown at that idea. Like, as someone who's been doing web development for like 20 years, the idea that I've just said, here's a URL, and my machine is navigating to that URL. And I guess kind of while we're filling time while Copilot does its thing, you could imagine that using Playwright, it could navigate the browser for me. It could like fill in a form. It could submit that form, complete your expense report for you, so you don't have to write your own expense report. But that's the kind of thing that like we could do here, because we could build an application around a constrained domain and a problem that we want to solve. We can then bring in some MCP servers or bring in some like external systems that are going to help us solve that. In this case, browser automation. Pop up with Playwright, navigate around a known page in a website, fill it in based off of information that Copilot is like glean from another file, glean from another system, ask the user to provide as contextual information about what it's doing, and complete a job for you. I think I remember seeing demos from one of the AI companies around, like it's going to book a restaurant for you. This is how you could build that kind of a system. I haven't actually seen any of those in the wild yet, but this is how you would go about building that kind of a system for you. All right.
So one step closer to my goal of never having to speak to any actual people ever again. And
Yep. Yeah, basically. Okay, so while I was musing along there, like it completed the report behind the scenes. It then prompted me, would you like it to generate tests? I said yes. It's detected C# as the language of choice for running these tests because we just have one C# file in there. So I'm like, yep, that's the one I want to use. So we're going to do that. And now it's going to go ahead and generate accessibility tests. Playwright knows how to write tests for Playwright. So it's Copilot is just being like, I want you to write some tests. Here are some things that has been determined need accessibility tests written for. So go ahead and generate them for you. Now, obviously, I don't actually have a test project in here, so it's just going to drop in some like arbitrary files, which might not necessarily be ideal, but you can imagine that you have like a test directory, and maybe you would tweak the prompt that we provided to it and saying like, this is where you would write those test files out to, and so on and so forth. So let's open up our window, our sidebar here. We'll see that it hasn't generated those tests yet because this is all happening in the background still, but we'll give it a minute or so, and hopefully we'll have a test file. But we might use the magic of editing to jump forward in time to that. Because I don't actually know how long this is going to take.
What is Open Dyslexic?
Oh, Open Dyslexic is a font designed for people that have dyslexia. My eldest has been diagnosed with dyslexia and dysgraphia, which means that so dysgraphia is to writing what dyslexia is to reading. So he gets letters backwards when he's writing. But Open Dyslexia, the way the glyphs are in the font, it's meant to be more optimized for someone that has dyslexia. I have pretty bad reading and writing myself. There's a good chance that I'm dyslexic. I've just never been diagnosed. So that's why I have Open Dyslexia as a font choice on my website. I actually use it on my Kindle. Kindle is my default language, my default font too.
Gen X not diagnosed with anything and just running through the world without any help. But yeah, I'm always interested in getting more readable fonts and what is the most readable font.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting one.
All right, it's done. So let's go. Okay, there we go. We are now completed with that last bit of the Copilot our application run. Let's just have a look back at what we got back as some output, so we can see that it's going to create a project file to make a runnable test suite. It's generated me accessibility test with 25 comprehensive tests in there. It's created me a NUnit Playwright test application, and then it's given me some information about the tests that it's generated, and then even some instructions on how I go about running this. We're not going to run it. Let's just open up the tests, because we don't actually want to run the test. We just want to see what it did. But here we go. Here's the accessibility test that it's done. Where it should have a proper lang attribute, and we can see here that it has asserted that there is a lang attribute. So sorry, I will not move my mouse around so we don't get hovers and stuff like that. But we're going to the page. We're getting the HTML attribute, the HTML elements lang attribute, and it's asserting that that's got a value, that it's not empty. Like, it's really cool, right? Like it's the kind of thing that you could just have as part of your toolbox to generate out this. And now this script file that I've got here, this working with Copilot SDK, just could be part of our repo, and it's just on like a CI job, or it's just part of the commit workflow that you've got. You run it against a new page, you perform your accessibility tests, and we get a report out. We then generate tests as is needed, and we keep expanding our test suite based off of stuff that that we may not know to look for. I'm definitely not an accessibility expert, so I don't know what to look for in this. But we can use Copilot to help us with that, and we could bring in custom tools, custom skills out of the awesome Copilot repo to again enhance the capabilities of Copilot in building this.
That's amazing. I think that a lot of organizations, no, a lot of developers, I should say, are a little bit scared of accessibility. They know in their minds that they need to be on top of it, that they need to improve, they need to implement it, but they just don't even know where to start. And having something like this that can give them a jump on that, and with it being its single focus, that's really, I think that would be really helpful to so many people, so many organizations. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and like you think about how many kind of like specific tasks that you do, you're just like, I wish I could just automate that. But it's a little bit more complex than just like a bash script. And it's like, I mean, I can just, open up the Copilot panel in VS Code, or I can open up Copilot CLI, but I don't like it's repetitive work that I'm constantly doing. Well, generate a README file from like a code file that we've written, or there's like heaps of different ways that we can leverage this stuff, and like just using Copilot SDK means that we can build out that little agent, and we don't have to worry about all the stuff that kind of sits around productionizing an agentic workflow, because that's like we already have that production capable agent in Copilot.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think a lot of people as well, they maybe don't know what they just got like a fly. Sorry, I look like an insane person. Stop it. Okay, hang on. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know what they should build. They don't know what they should, what the idea is. I think it's the same thing that we had like 10 years ago, where you'd be like, oh, I could have a startup, I just don't have an idea for an app. But now there is like a lot of the ideas, a lot of the use cases and all of that are in there, right? They're in the repo. They can, they can get started with, here are some things that you could use it for. And then other ideas will probably grow. The more you use it, the more you start to do stuff, you'll realize what else you could do for your business.
Yeah. And to kind of like help with that idea as well, we actually have a bunch of recipes in our cookbook as part of the awesome Copilot repo. So like we could, I'll do some Python for you. So just some like examples of how you could work with the Copilot SDK. And like here's a Python one where it's going to go ahead and just like manage files on like on your local machine. So again, we create our Copilot client, and we just go like, here's a folder. Just organize that into images, documents, and videos. Like throw it in a folder. Like how often do you just end up with that folder full of stuff, and you just got to kind of like deal with it? It's like Control A delete, or is there anything actually useful in here? Yeah, well, this is how you could have like just that little task that does it for you. It's going to analyze the files, it'll work out what should be in where, and do that on your behalf. Yeah.
You're aware that I, like everyone listening, uses their downloads folder as their working directory for everything.
Yeah. So we've got there's endless use cases, and trying to figure out exactly the right use case is probably like asking how long is a piece of string. There's plenty that we can do, and we've got some at least hopefully to give you some ideas in here. And like if you build stuff, we'd love to hear about it, and share it out with our communities as well.
Yes, well, that's fantastic to know that people can make an actual contribution to something that is really exciting right now for developers, and you don't have to be just part of the recipients of it, but you can be part of the change. That's cool. That's really exciting. Yep. I was gonna say, as a final question, where should developers start if they want to experiment with the SDK today. But I think you've shown them that with the repo, with the playbooks, with the awesome Copilot. There's a lot of stuff for people to get into there, and it does have a get start here thing as well.
Yep.
Is that what you'd say?
Yep, and we'll pop in the show notes some other like samples and demo videos that people in our broader team have created, because there's like I am by no means the most imaginative person out there, and some of the stuff that I've seen my colleagues have built with the Copilot SDK, I'm just like, wow, that is cool. Like, how did I not think of that first?
I never think I should have thought of it first. I always think maybe I could do that, but a little bit different and related to my dog. So, Coda is the one with all the big ideas in my coding experience. Obviously, he's sleeping right now, but he's thinking of those things. Cool. So, yeah, as Aaron has said, we're going to link all the resources from this episode to our show notes. We have been answering questions online during this episode, and we're going to stay online for another 10 minutes or so. So you can still put your questions in chat. Thank you for joining us. Aaron, thank you for this really, really good and in-depth episode. And we will see you all again next month.
Thank you for having me. See ya.
We hope you enjoyed this digital event. We have specialists on standby to answer your questions for a short while. To ask a question, type it into the chat window now and we'll get to it as quickly as we can. If you're not staying for the Q&A, thank you for attending and we hope to see you again soon.